If you're growing a fall garden, but you find yourself battling things like slugs and earwigs, don't worry, you're not alone. I've got some tips to help, and hopefully they'll help in your garden. Let's go. So when it comes to fall gardening, you're more than likely experiencing increased rain. And with that increased rain brings about it pests, things like earwigs, slugs, pill bugs, which is like the roly-polies, that's what we used to call them as kids, and as well as a whole other host of moisture-loving pests. And if you're experiencing some pest pressure, don't feel defeated. Don't feel like there's nothing you can do. There's quite a few things you can do. Now, in the summer, we don't really experience these pests as much because it's a whole lot drier. And they might be evident in your garden. They may be there, but they're underneath some mulch, or they're tucked away in different parts of your garden. But when your whole garden gets rained on pretty consistently like it has been, that excess moisture brings about those pests, and they really start honing in pretty close to home. And so there's a few things you can do, and we're going to talk about them in this video. And the first thing that I want to start with is your plant spacing. So what you'll notice with our radishes here is that while we do practice high intensity gardening, and we try to grow as much as we can in as little space as possible, there does come kind of some occurrences where we actually will space things out a little bit further, and that has to do with pest pressure. If we're starting to experience pest pressure, we're going to start thinning or harvesting a lot faster than we normally would, so that we have a lot more space between our plants. Because if you have more space, that is going to increase the airflow, which is going to increase the rate of drying. It's really going to dry the conditions out a whole lot faster, which is what the pests are kind of targeting for a home. They don't want to be someplace where it's dry. They prefer to be someplace where it's damp nearly all the time. And so that might be under large leaves, or like I said, in mulch, but it can also be in really dense foliage. And in the case of our radishes here, when we're growing very high intensity, we have a high density planting here, you have very little airflow. And so by spacing out your stuff a little bit more, that's going to increase the airflow, decrease the chance of a home being made near your plants, and also it's going to then decrease the amount of damage you're finding on your plants. Now, you're not going to be growing as much, but you might find that you end up harvesting more because less is being damaged by pests. So it kind of has a tendency to sometimes balance out. And if that's the case, definitely give that a shot. We space our radishes typically about 1.5 inches apart. However, once pest pressure starts to set in late fall, and we're constantly getting rain, like we've had rain every day for the past 4 days. They're constantly getting rain, and they're also constantly getting dew. We'll then space our radishes out about every 3 inches. So that's quite a lot. That's almost double the amount of spacing. Well, it is double the amount of spacing of what we would normally be at. But that increased spacing really helps to cut down on the pest pressure, I find, just with helping them dry out a little bit more. The second thing you can do is you can try to remove some lower leaves. Now, with crops like radishes, that might be a little bit difficult. Give it a shot and see. Obviously, there's not that many leaves on a radish plant as it is, but when it comes to things like kale or some of your brassicas, cabbage, broccoli, always try to remove those lower leaves. Those lower leaves, they are going to be closer to the ground, and as they get heavier, they have a higher likelihood of touching the ground or providing shade and moisture for those pests to survive and thrive near your garden. And so in the case of like our kale here, we can actually remove these lower leaves, pruning the plant up and giving them a little more height, so there's more distance between the closest set of leaves and the soil level. That's a really big problem that I see a lot of gardeners having, is just too much foliage touching the ground. And like I said, in some cases, like with lettuce or radishes, there's not a whole lot you can do. So in those cases, obviously, plant spacing will make a huge difference. But with these larger leaves, like in your brassicas and stuff like that, absolutely pruning them up can certainly help. Even in late fall with stuff like your squash plants and zucchini plants, not only are you going to see a benefit from having less powdery mildew and soil-borne funguses on your squash plants, but you're also going to decrease the pest pressure as well, which is a huge problem in fall. And again, they're just finding that source of moisture, and the leaves close to the soil are helping keep that moisture kind of right where they want it, which is near their food source. So give that a shot, and that'll probably really help. Now, there's one thing that I don't want you to do, and that's to use things like diatomaceous earth. Now, you're going to hear a lot of gardeners recommending using diatomaceous earth because, true, Diatomaceous earth is a crushed up, essentially fossilized shell. It's a diatom. And it creates this really crystalline, coarse structure, microscopic, that when you spray it on your plants, it does affect hard-shelled insects like beetles, or in our case, fall pests, earwigs, pill bugs. They're all hard-shelled insects. And it's really going to affect them. However, because it gets wet, completely removes the effectiveness of diatomaceous earth. Diatomaceous earth only works on contact. If you spread diatomaceous earth over your beds, put it on your crops, if it does not come directly in contact with the pest, it won't have any effect at all. And the moment it gets wet, it's completely irrelevant at that point, and you're just wasting a bunch of money. And so because it's the wet season, I would never, ever, ever, under any circumstances, recommend using things like diatomaceous earth. Second thing I wouldn't recommend using is things like sand. Sand works against slugs in the summer because it's kept dry, and that removes their slime coating. They have to excrete more slime to cross things like sand when it's dry, so they tend to avoid it. Works very great in the summer. We've done a whole lot of videos on it. Not so much in the fall, because again, as soon as it becomes damp, they'll just they'll just slime right over it and laugh their whole way to your plants. And so do not use those things. The biggest thing you can do is what we call just preventative methods, like increasing your spacing, pruning up the leaves. And then the third thing that you can do is you can increase your row spacing. It's very similar to planting, or to just spacing out your plantings. But when you're putting your rows in, typically, like with our radishes, we would space our rows about 3 inches apart. However, these rows are spaced about 6 inches apart. Again, twice the spacing. Why is that? Well, again, we want to increase the overall airflow. If you have 3-inch spacing, you're talking about a lot of foliage that's overlapping, and that's all overlapping foliage that's going to prevent evaporation, hold moisture near the soil, and make a nice shady, dark location that those pests absolutely love to live in. And so by spacing out your rows as well can really help. Again, if it sounds like there's not a whole lot of things you can do in the fall and spring in those wet seasons, you'd be somewhat correct. A lot of it is just coexisting, planting more plants, reducing the overall damage, doing things like keeping mulch down, keeping mulch away from your plants. I guess that's another thing too. Definitely don't mulch your beds in fall. Do not mulch your beds, especially if you have enough rain coming. Mulch just protects the soil, helps smother out weeds, but it also protects the soil and holds moisture in the soil, which is what those pests love. So definitely do not mulch the soil in the fall if you're getting lots of rain. But there's not a ton you can do, but these 3 things we have done, and they've worked very well for us. And just kind of reducing those pests is the name of the game for getting a nice fall harvest. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you all learned something new. And if you are growing a fall garden, let me know in the comments box down below if this helped. And as always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel, reminding you to grow bigger. Take care. Bye. Hey, thank you so much for watching today's video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed, consider clicking this one. You'll probably enjoy it just as much. I want to thank you for your viewership, because without it, this channel would not be as amazing as it is. Also, if you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing. It's free, and we upload videos every Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. We also have vegetable seeds, fertilizer, or tools. If you need any of those, consider visiting MIgardener.com. Links will be in the description box below. We've got you covered. And as always, we'll see you all in the garden. Take care.